Welcome. Welcome to the French Legion of Honor's pinning ceremony for my father, Emil G. Hirsch, or as they say, Sir Emil G. Hirsch. I'm Major Bernie Hirsch, a mission pilot with the Civil Air Patrol, or CAP, the Civilian Auxiliary of the United States Air Force, and we're part of the America's Total Forces. This event is being professionally recorded and photographed. As we proceed with this solemn ceremony, I kindly request that you refrain from taking photos or recordings. This is to ensure that we can fully immerse ourselves in the significance of this event. I also ask that you silence your phone as a sign of respect. Please stand now, if you're able, for the posting of the colors. Please remain standing for the playing of the national anthems of the United States and France and our invocation.
Wow.
Color, they're both colors. Ready, post. Present. Order. On. Turn to ranks. Forward. Arch.
Please bow your heads now for our invocation. Dear God, not everything in your world reflects your goodness and grace. Today, we remember a time of great evil, World War II. We remember those who stood their ground and fought for goodness at home and on the battlefronts to ensure that evil would not prevail. We thank you that in France's hour of need, you gave American men and women the strength and resolve to stand, whatever the cost. May those brave souls who remain here with us today feel your hand of favor and strength. Give them renewed hope and an awareness of our gratitude for their bravery and sacrifice. May we never forget them, and may you bless them all the days of their lives. Amen. Please be seated. It warms our hearts to see friends and family who have traveled far to be with us. We also extend our warmest welcome to those watching in the overflow area, on closed circuit TV throughout the building, or on the YouTube live stream worldwide. Your presence, wherever you are, adds to the significance of this ceremony. The National Order of the Legion of Honor is the highest French order of merit, both military and civil. The nomination and vetting process to be accepted is confidential, but we thank those involved, one of whom recently passed away. If you are active or have served in the United States military, civilian total forces, or as a first responder, would you stand, if able, wherever you are in the world right now, so we may recognize your service? Thank you for your service. When he was 18, my father joined General Patton's 3rd Army and served 151 days in active combat throughout Europe. Dad's first battle began on October 19, 1944. His 95th Infantry Division engaged the enemy on the front line in northeastern France, south of the fortress city of Metz. For a month, the division fought against heavy German resistance to capture the forts surrounding Metz. General Kittel, the vanquished German commander of Metz, gave the division its nickname, the Iron Men of Metz. Dad, you told me your regiment moved out for a surprise attack on some forts, leaving you and a handful of soldiers behind as a decoy to occupy the 8.5 mile regimental front alone. Your mission was to deceive the enemy into believing the full regiment of several thousand soldiers was still defending the front. Using only 9 .50 caliber machine guns and primarily loudspeakers, you and your buddies made as much noise as possible, playing sounds of rumbling trucks and other troop activity while moving from foxhole to foxhole. Your small force could have been overrun any time, but the trick worked like a charm. Enemy snipers were only 1,000 yards away, and they were in clear sight, while shells continued to rain down on your positions. But the enemy was fooled, and the mission to capture the forts was successful. The fortress city, considered impregnable, fell to the 95th Infantry Division on November 22, 1944. The last force to conquer Metz was commanded by Attila the Hun in 415 AD, more than 1,500 years before World War II. As a teenager, Dad, you learned to drive by backing a 3/4-ton truck down an alley in France. You were trained as a replacement where needed, and your duties included messenger, scout, observer, and acting first sergeant. You seemed so peaceful sitting there, but your weapons qualified with the pistol, bayonet, M1 rifle, carbine, bazooka, hand grenade, Browning automatic submachine gun, 30 and 50 millimeter machine guns, 57 millimeter anti-tank gun, landmine, and TNT explosive material. The items on a table to my right include 2 German bayonets and a helmet that you captured. Also on the table are your Bronze Star Medal awarded for valor, Combat Infantry Badge, American and European Theater of Operations Medals, Good Conduct Medal, Meritorious Unit Award, World War II Victory Medal, and a commendation from General George S. Patton. The division's 15,000 men suffered 10,204 casualties throughout the war, including 1,128 killed. Today, 80 years later, we will never forget them, and thank you, Dad, one of the only remaining Iron Men of Metz, for your service. And now we will hear some remarks from several distinguished guests. First, Colonel Robert M. Carton of the Civil Air Patrol. Colonel Carton is the acting legal officer for the Great Lakes Region and Illinois Wing. During his 33-year tenure in CAP, Colonel Carton has held the positions of Illinois Wing Inspector General, Wing Commander, Great Lakes Region Commander, National Legal Officer, and Parliamentarian for the National Executive Committee and Board. Colonel Carton is an instrument-rated pilot and has flown numerous search and rescue and disaster relief missions as a mission pilot. He studied at the University of Illinois in Urbana and earned his law degree at the DePaul University College of Law in Chicago. He began his civilian career as an assistant state's attorney in the Criminal Trial Division of Cook County and is now in private practice in Chicago. Colonel Carton is a native Chicagoan where he resides with his wife, Lee. He has a daughter, 2 sons, 2 stepdaughters, and 8 grandchildren. Would you please welcome Colonel Robert M. Carton.
Good afternoon. This will be a rarity. You will hear a lawyer give a short speech. It is an honor for me to be here representing Colonel Rose Hunt, the current commander of the Great Lakes region of the Civil Air Patrol. She was not able to be here today. The color guard today, consisting of cadets from the Milwaukee Composite Squadron, based at Chicago Executive Airport next door in Wheeling, Illinois, has been provided to present the colors at the request of Major Hirsch. Our honoree's proud son is a member of the Indiana Wing of the Civil Air Patrol. The Civil Air Patrol was born on December 1, 1941. It was comprised of volunteers who, using their own aircraft on their own nickels, risked their lives flying submarine patrols off the east and west coasts of the United States. Their armament consisted of small bombs, which if used at all were dropped out of the windows, and they were very effective in keeping submarines submerged. If they spotted a submarine, they would radio the Coast Guard, and then they tracked the submarines, flying however they needed to fly, until the Coast Guard arrived and was able to take more definitive action against the subs. As a matter of fact, there's one anecdote that near the end of the war in the Atlantic, one of the German submarine commanders commented about how much he and his comrades hated those little yellow mosquitoes, referring to the Civil Air Patrol aircraft. The missions of the Civil Air Patrol were supposed to have been non-combat, as they are today. However, despite the fact that the missions were non-combat, many members of the Civil Air Patrol lost their lives or suffered serious injury as a result of flying long hours over water. Remember, the days back then were kind of primitive when it came to navigation and navigation aids. Pardon me. Civil Air Patrol members were, at the time, as they are today, volunteers. Although today we are considered part of the total force, Civil Air Patrol volunteers do not get any benefit packages afforded to service members and veterans. In 1947, by act of Congress, the Civil Air Patrol was made the official civilian auxiliary of the Air Force. The 3 primary missions of the Civil Air Patrol are to provide emergency services for state and local agencies, to promote aerospace education and careers in aviation, and to establish and administer a cadet program for our 12 to 18-year-old cadets, focusing on leadership, aerospace, fitness, and character. You see wonderful examples right here and in the back of the room. Today we have about 60,000 cadet and senior members of Civil Air Patrol, all of whom, as I said, are still volunteers. We also have a fleet of about 550 aircraft. We have the largest civilian fleet of Cessnas in the world. It's all used for search and rescue, disaster relief, air reconnaissance, and mission support for local and state agencies. Civil Air Patrol and our modern armed forces grew up pretty much together after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Bless you. As we say, well, a sneeze at the truth. We have learned so much about duty, dedication, honor, and patriotism from our active duty brothers and sisters and from our veterans. We are indebted to Private Emil Hirsch for his sacrifices and for his example. Colonel Hunt extends her personal thank you and her congratulations for the honor you so rightly received today. It is my honor and privilege to add mine as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Colonel Carton. And now we will hear remarks from another distinguished guest. Director Terry Prince was appointed Acting Director of the Illinois Department of Veterans Affairs by Governor J.B. Pritzker on April 1st, 2021, and confirmed by the Senate Executive Appointment Committee on March 28, 2022. As Director, he leads a team of 1,200 professionals in partnership with numerous state and local organizations to provide beneficial services for more than 600,000 veterans and their families throughout the state of Illinois. Director Prince began his military career in 1986, serving at 14 different duty stations worldwide. His most recent tours include Command Master Chief at Naval Hospital Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. He closed out his illustrious 31-year career in 2017 as the 13th Director of the U.S. Navy Hospital Corps and Force Master Chief of Navy Medicine. He is a proud and fellow Eagle Scout and an Ironman Hawaii Triathlon World Championship finisher. Director Prince, yes, Director Prince and his veteran wife, Dr. Jennifer Prince, 12-year Navy veteran, reside in Chicago. Please give a warm welcome to Director Terry Prince.
I just have to say the Ironman thing was a long time ago. Based on what I heard today, I've got more training to do. My Ironman wasn't anything like his. I wore flimsy shorts and a t-shirt, so we'll go from there. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. It's an absolute honor to be here on behalf of Governor Pritzker, the administration, and certainly the many veterans and families that make up our great state of Illinois. I have notes here that I'm supposed to talk about certain things, but I'll try to keep to it as best as I can. I've been accused of never meeting a microphone I didn't like, so I'll try to make it easy. We already talked about and heard about Ironman of Metz and the demonstrated determination and dedication and valor that you displayed. I had a laugh with one of your family members earlier, and I know we're supposed to be serious, but I also want to have some fun. And we talked about how you fought at the Battle of the Bulge. And I was in the Navy for 31 years, and the only Battle of the Bulge I fought was to make sure that my uniform fit properly during the semi-annual uniform measurements that we would do in the Navy. But for those of you that don't know, Mr. Hirsch was one of 16 million troops who served in the United States Armed Forces during World War II, and 73% of the people who served overseas. I've had the opportunity to serve overseas in Okinawa, Japan, and Korea, and other places, but I suspect, and many of you know, that serving overseas during World War II was a much different prospect. When France was defending Poland with their own military support after the Germans invaded, we as the United States joined our allies to fight for the freedom of all people and their lands. At the time, we had over 2.2 million soldiers, sailors, and airmen serving in the military and needed supplies, uniforms, guns, tanks, all the things you can imagine to fight a war of that magnitude. An entire nation was dedicated to this fight, as it was fought in nearly 50 countries, on the air, on land, and at sea, where cities were charred, civilians lost their lives, and many of our troops never had the opportunity to come home to their families. But together, as allies, we succeeded in preventing an evil power from extending its tentacles further into our world than it already had, and finally ending the senseless loss of life while preserving our freedom. This June 6th, the world will recognize the 80th anniversary of a red letter day in our nation's history and our world's history, and that's D-Day, the largest naval, air, and land operation in our history, where over 156,000 troops landed on the beaches of Normandy. And within just a few days, nearly 300,000 people, 50,000 vehicles, and over 100,000 tons of equipment were deployed into France. France was liberated by August of 1944, and the war ended in the following spring. To many, D-Day was marked as the beginning of the end of World War II. But we know that there were hundreds of battles around the world, including the ones that Mr. Hirsch fought in, that contributed to our victory. We honor him today and every hero who's worn our uniform, especially in World War II, for their incredible sacrifices. Mr. Hirsch's distinction is among the many medals that he's earned during his military service. But today, as a nation and as a fellow veteran, even as a Navy veteran, I recognize your contributions. All of us here in Illinois recognize, and we're humbled by your sacrifice and commitment, and by ensuring that our great friend and colleague in France, a friend of our nation, their freedoms were restored and maintained forever, which is the biggest gift that anyone could give beyond measure. Congratulations, sir. It's an honor.
Thank you, Director Prince. Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Patrick Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds is the Community Outreach Coordinator for U.S. Senator Richard J. Durbin. In addition to his role with the U.S. Senate, Mr. Reynolds serves as an engineer officer in the Illinois Army National Guard, where he leads over 100 soldiers at the company level. He holds 2 bachelor's degrees and is currently pursuing a master's degree in urban planning and policy. Please welcome Mr. Patrick Reynolds.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Director Prince, for your kind remarks. Thank you, Colonel Carton and Major Hirsch. I'd also like to thank and recognize the entire Hirsch family, the Civil Air Patrol cadets who are gathered here today, and all those who have gathered to celebrate Mr. Hirsch and his remarkable contributions to both the United States and France. Again, my name is Patrick Reynolds, and I serve as Senator Durbin's Outreach Coordinator. And today I have the distinct honor of presenting Mr. Hirsch with an official letter from Senator Durbin congratulating him on being awarded the French Legion of Honor. The Legion of Honor is the highest distinction that France can bestow. It recognizes those who have sacrificed and achieved remarkable deeds for the citizens of that country. While serving with the 378th Infantry Regiment, Mr. Hirsch's actions directly led to the liberation of the town of Metz and the entirety of France, ultimately ending World War II. Mr. Hirsch, I say this both as a citizen of this great state and as a fellow Army veteran. Thank you so much for what you've done. It is because of the legacy and the example of you and your generation of soldiers that I continue to serve and my entire generation continues to serve. It is a genuine honor to stand beside you and to celebrate this well-deserved award. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Before introducing the French Consul General, I will share a final remark made by Sergeant John E. Phillips, a member of the Anti-Tank Company, Dad. He mentioned your closest Army buddy from Kenosha, Wisconsin, Lou Cadwit. Sergeant Phillips said that Staff Sergeant Louis Cadwit was one of the best men in this or any other Army, and that we should all remember his name, for he'll never know whether what he fought for was all in vain. Sergeant Phillips wrote, "The following day, the 19th of October, we had our first casualty, and I believe it was the first in the regiment. The 2nd platoon was on the line near Marial and had been taking a terrific shelling all day. Everyone was in their foxholes, and most of them had logs over the tops. This one was a lucky hit because it hit right where the logs and the ground met and went into the hole. It hit in one end of the hole, and Cadwit caught most of the explosion, although Zialo and Smock got cut up pretty bad. It killed Staff Sergeant Cadwit outright. Zialo and Smock were evacuated. It just goes to show that when your number's up, you'll get it no matter where you're at. You just keep hoping they don't pull your number out the hat. We were all pretty nervous for a while, but things like this can make a guy crack up, so you forget them as quick as possible. You identified his body, Dad. You told me the other two men in that foxhole were permanently wounded and spent the rest of their lives in military hospitals. We are honored that Staff Sergeant Louis Cadwit's nephew and namesake, Lou Crisper, has joined us today from Wisconsin. Please stand and be recognized for your uncle's service and ultimate sacrifice. And now, the moment for which we've all been waiting. I'm terrible at foreign languages, so please pardon my French. The Honorable Yannick Tagand was appointed General Consul of France in Chicago in September 21, with jurisdiction for 13 states. Prior to this assignment, Yannick Tagand was Deputy Director for Egypt and the Levant region within the Department of North Africa and Middle East of the French Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs. A graduate of the Université Panthéon-Sorbonne, where he obtained a master's in international relations, and from the Institut National des Langues et Civilisations Orientales, where he obtained a degree in Arabic. He began his career at the Ministry for Europe and European Affairs in 2005. He was assigned to the Department of North Africa and Middle East in 2007, where his responsibilities included the bilateral relations between France and Egypt, as well as France and Jordan. In 2009, he joined the French Embassy in Egypt as spokesman and head of the press department. He was then posted in Brussels from 2013 to 2017 as counselor for the Near and Middle East at the permanent representation of France to the European Union. Earlier in his career, he served in Yemen. Yannick Tagand is married with 2 children. Please welcome Consul General Yannick Tagand.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, and I want to commend your French, which is seems to be very good. Dear Mr. Hirsch, dear members of the Armed Forces, dear family and distinguished guests, I'm very honored and moved to be in Northbrook today for this very special tribute to you, Mr. Hirsch. In a few minutes, I will have the immense privilege to present to you, on behalf of the President of the French Republic, my country's highest distinction, the French Legion of Honor. And the reasons for which you have been granted this distinction make me feel even more privileged. Mr. Hirsch, this medal and today's ceremony aim to mark France's eternal gratitude and recognition for your outstanding participation in the liberation of my country, France. Mr. Hirsch, in January 1944, you were just 18 years old when you were inducted into the United States Army, where you would serve with the 95th Infantry Division, 378th Regiment and Titan Company. Many years have passed since you left your family, your friends, and Illinois, your home state, for your military training and service, but France has not forgotten. Mr. Hirsch, after several months of military training in Illinois, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts, on August 6, 1944, you embarked on the USS Mariposa and set sail for England. But your journey on continental Europe started a month later when you landed on the coast of Normandy at the famous Omaha Beach. From the fall of 1944 until the end of the war, you took part in several campaigns, including northern France, Rhineland, Ardennes, Alsace, and Central Europe. You served in various capacities, as it has been recalled. clerk, typist, messengers, observer, scout, and acting first sergeant. In October 1944, your division, a part of Patton's Third Army, reached the Argonne Forest, then the Moselle area in Lorraine, and immediately entered into combat. And for several weeks, without interruption, you and your fellow soldiers fought bravely to repel all enemy attempts to cross the river and to break the defense lines established by the Reich forces around the cities of Metz, Thionville, and Nancy. But the fortress city of Metz was for Germany the place to hold at all costs, and it became the theater of fierce fighting where both sides suffered heavy casualties. On November 22nd, Metz was liberated from the Nazis, but the fight for the nearby forts continued on into December, and it would be remembered as one of the hardest fought campaigns of the war. For your bravery and tenacity in combat, you, Mr. Hirsch, and the men of your division would earn prestigious distinction from the American military authorities, but you would also earn these famous nicknames of the Iron Man of Metz, a nickname first given by General Heinrich Kittel, the German commander of the Metz area. After this intensive campaign, with the 378th Regiment, you pursued the offensive in the Moselle region, on the French-Belgian front and the French-German border, then into Belgium and into the Netherlands, until the end of February 1945, before crossing to Nazi Germany. In June 1945, you finally returned to the United States, and you were honorably discharged on January 1946. Mr. Hirsch, this recognition comes as we are approaching the 80th anniversary of D-Day in Normandy. So I would like to reference here a recent speech of President Emmanuel Macron, which roughly translates to, "Let us never forget a lesson of courage and commitment given to us by our liberators, which enforces a sense of duty and must inspire us every day. These allies who came to die on our soil, on a land that for some they had never set foot upon, for the freedom of France and the values they shared with us." Mr. Hirsch, thanks to your unfailing determination and bravery, you and your companions have restored hope to millions of people. Hope that had been crushed by the intolerance, violence, and the tyranny of the Nazis. Mr. Hirsch, you are part of the greatest generation, an exceptional generation of men and women who have put their ideas, their might, and their courage to the service of democracy and the dignity of humankind. And your story reminds us that France and the US fought side by side in this war, the greatest conflict in history. After the war, our countries did everything within their power to ensure that such bloodshed would never again return to Europe. Yet, the war waged by Russia against Ukraine since 2022 proved that this peace was not to last. This war is as well another defining moment of our times, because this is not simply another war in Europe, but rather a war on our collective system of principles and values which we must defend together. And it reminds us the legacy that we inherited from the greatest generation, peace, and peace which was made possible by our rule-based order and by NATO. And so today it is up to us to protect this legacy, and we definitely need the US support to do so. Mr. Hirsch, for your outstanding service during the war, you have received many distinctions from the United States. Some of them are on display on the table. But today, France wishes to honor you, as well as the memory of all those who endured the war and all those soldiers who did not return home. Mr. Hirsch, you are a true hero, and thanks to you, I grew up in a free country, in a country that has been living in peace for 8 decades, the longest period of continuous peace in the modern history of France. The French-American friendship has profound and long-lasting roots deeply anchored within the Midwest and here in Illinois. It has endured many centuries and outlived some political spats, but the French people will never forget what we owe you and all the American people. And we will remain loyal to the legacy, the sacrifice, and the values of the heroes who liberated Western Europe. Dear Mr. Hirsch, I could not be more honored to present the Legion of Honor Medal to you today. So from the bottom of my heart, I would like to thank you very much, and excuse my French, but I will have to continue in French.
Thank you.
Will you stand or are you?
Yeah, I'll go.
It's up to you.
Thank you.
Monsieur Hirsch, au nom du président de la République française, je vous fais chevalier dans l'ordre de la Légion d'honneur. Félicitations.
Thank you, Monsieur Tagand. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce the man of the hour, indeed the century, for our closing remarks. Please welcome Chevalier of the Ordre National de la Légion d'Honneur, Sir Emil Gus Hirsch.
Bonjour.
French.
Yannick Tagand and your staff and all my friends here and watching. I am truly honored by your presence. And merci, French President Macron, who as Grand Master of the French Legion of Honor accepted me as a Chevalier, a Knight of France. I am often asked what I remember about my combat service in World War II. I remember on a cold, snowy day in February in 1944, getting off the troop train at Indiantown Gap, a military fortress in the mountains of Pennsylvania, and being assigned to the anti-tank company of the 378th Infantry Regiment of the 95th Infantry Division. I had just turned 18 years old in November, and I had never been away from home, and because my division was being brought up to full strength for going to Europe, I was given all my military training, marching, shooting, saluting, and how to make my bed in my anti-tank company. I also remember the other 165 men in my company having trouble pronouncing my name Emil and deciding to call me Gus, which is a short version of my middle name, Gustav. One of my teachers who became my closest soldier friend was Staff Sergeant Louis Cadwood, who sadly was killed by a German artillery shell hitting his foxhole on our first day on the front lines in France. I remember the 1930s luxury ship Mariposa turned into a troop ship, sailing us over the German submarine-controlled Atlantic Ocean to Liverpool. We were without convoy, and every 6 minutes we would zigzag. I remember the kindly old couple in Winchester, England. I met one Sunday afternoon while taking a walk through the town, who invited Sims and me into their home and insisted they feed us lunch, as they hoped was happening to their son, who was a British fighter pilot in India, and in memory of their daughter, who was killed in an air raid in London. Every month while I was in Europe, they collected and sent me 20 different magazines, which I gratefully shared. I remember visiting London for 24 hours while buzz-bombs were flying over London, and being appalled at the terrible destruction I viewed at Westminster Abbey and everywhere. I remember landing at Omaha Beach in Normandy, France, several months after D-Day, and sadly viewing thousands of white crosses as I debarked the British troop transport ship. I remember driving in a truck convoy through Paris a few days after it was liberated from the Germans. And the next year, in May of 1945, spending 3 days in that beautiful city. I climbed to the top of the Eiffel Tower and bought a souvenir for my mother. I also had never visited any palace, and the Palace of Versailles was unbelievable. One of my mother's cousins was an officer on Eisenhower's staff, and he took me to lunch away from where the GIs usually visit. In the park, a man stopped us and told us his story. He had been beaten on the head by the Gestapo and had a metal plate in his head, which he had me feel. He was Jewish and wanted to thank us for rescuing him. I remember other stories of French heroism. One was at a convent where I was the first American soldier to stop at it to check it out, and the Mother Superior wanted me to meet several very young Jewish girls they had hidden there. I remember being in the front seat of the lead Jeep, driving up to a concentration camp-like stockade where human skeletons came pouring out. They were all Russian prisoners of war soldiers who looked like the all-bones, no-fat human skeleton I had once seen in my doctor uncle's office. One of the Russian soldiers handed me the huge Nazi flag, which must have hung over the prison. He said something to me I did not understand, and I took it with me as a war object to show my parents. My mother couldn't look at it and burned it up. I remember driving all night for 3 nights in a blacked out, no lights truck convoy in freezing below zero weather to relieve the 101st Airborne Division at Bastogne, Belgium. I will never forget the overpowering stench of death there. I remember my anti-tank company being assigned to a special task force attached to the British Second Army in Holland and Germany, and stopping in the Holland-Germany border city, Tienray, in Holland. I was on guard duty at our anti-tank company command post. A 22-year-old young man rode up to me on his bicycle and said to me in English, "Are you Juden?" I said yes, and he said to me that he was the Dutch underground leader in the area, and he wanted me to come with him to bear witness and meet a 28-year-old Jewish nurse from Rotterdam, which his group had hidden from the Nazis for 3 years. I reported this to my captain, and he gave me permission to go with Nico Doman, but cautioned me to be careful and take my rifle. I went with him to a farm about a mile out of town, and he showed me the hidden cellar under the kitchen, which had in it a table, 2 cots, some chairs, and a mimeograph machine, and a shortwave radio. Nico and the owner of the farm, Hannah Vandervoort, are listed in the Jerusalem Yad Vashem Memorial to the non-Jewish righteous among the nations. Nico wrote to me in Chicago on July 10th in 1946, and I'll read to you a small part of his letter. Indeed, much has happened since we saw you, and we understand very well that it was for you a hard job to fight in Germany. We will never forget what you as soldiers have done for our liberation. We are and will be forever thankful to you and your comrades. Here in Holland, we have the graves of thousands and thousands of American soldiers who all sacrificed their life to make us free from the Nazi devil. When you are visiting such graves, you will see many people bringing the nicest flowers to their unknown friends. That's all still the only thing they can do for them. My name is Nico, and I was the leader of the underground in the surroundings of Chinray. That's quite right. What happened with us when you left us? We had still a hard time because suddenly we got many German shells and we had to stay in the cellar again. The last shells we got at the 23rd of February. This date was for us the end of the troubles because on that day the Germans on the other side of the river, Maas, were surrounded and surrendered. You have met in our house an old father, 72 years old, and a lady, 40 years old. Those persons were the owners of the house. I came there in May 1943. At that time I was studying already at the university, but we had to sign a declaration that we should be loyal to the Germans and the German occupation. Most of the students did not sign this declaration, and then we got an order to go to Germany in prison camp. From that time I had to hide myself from the Germans, and therefore I went to this family in Chinray, because Chinray was a very small village and there were no Germans at that time. From that date, we tried to help and hide all kinds of persons who had to flee from the Germans. It is incredible how much this old father and lady have done. We made our house a refuge, and in 2.5 years, we saw more than 250 persons in our house, all refugees. They were staying in our house until I found a home where they could stay during the occupation. We had persons who had to work in Germany. We had many Jews, especially Jewish children, more than 80. We had French soldiers who escaped from German prisoner camp. We gave them the best food we had and a nice bed for a couple of days and brought them to the Belgian frontier where we handed them to men of the Belgium underground, the WWII Brigade. We had also English and American soldiers. During 3 months, we had 2 American pilots hidden in our house, and that was very dangerous. In those years, we have had many fearful days. Each person could be a traitor, and such persons were real hyena dogs. On the last night of July 1944, the German security policeman came with 7 other policemen to catch me. That was a night I can never forget. I did not like to go in the hiding place because I was afraid that the Germans should catch then the old father or Hannah. But they asked me with tears, and I went in. Indeed, the Germans did not find me, but they took Hannah, and at the same time, 7 Jewish children, all beneath the 10 years. You cannot understand what that meant to me. I know what should be the end for them. Gas dead. We have done in the following days all we could do for saving them. By a lucky chance, a young lady from the Amsterdam underground got Hannah out of the prisoner camp after 9 days. But In those 9 days, the children were brought to Germany, and we are sure they have been gassed. You saw also in our house a Jewish nurse. She was also a refugee and spent most of her time in our house. She is at the moment nursing here in Amsterdam. Her parents returned from the prison camp Theresienstadt and are at the moment in good health. Nico passed away in 2008. I've often been asked, how do you cope with the dangers all around you? Then and now, I hum and whistle and sing to myself all the great songs and music of the 1930s and the years before and after. Such songs as I'll See You in My Dreams and A Pretty Girl is Like a Melody, and If You Knew Susie Like I Know Susie, and Thanks for the Memory, and many others. Time seemed to go by and the danger passed. I remember the one time I was truly scared. It was after Metz and we were attacking the German Siegfried line and the thick concrete below ground German pillboxes. The men in the line companies of the regiment were being killed and wounded at a very high rate, and replacements for them were returning to zero. I was by myself in a foxhole, and enemy shells were exploding everywhere. My captain called me to his foxhole and said he was awaiting orders to transfer all available men from our anti-tank company to a line company, and that I would have to be sent. I returned to my foxhole and said out loud, or maybe just to myself, "Oh God, I am afraid, I'm scared. I don't know any prayer but one." And then I said the children's prayer in German my father taught me when I was 1 year old. Mir bin ich Geseru, schließe meine Augen zu. Father, du in Himmel mein, wird Herr Dank mein Hier sein. Amen. Good night. That evening, my anti-tank company was withdrawn from the battle line and sent north to Bestow, Belgium, to fight in the Battle of the Bulge. I pray that someday our world will find the religion of humanity, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Amen.
We thank you for joining us today. In just a moment, we will exit these doors to my left for refreshments. As we filter out, CAP cadets will stand by our memorabilia table if you wish to view any World War II items. Our photographer will take a portrait of you and Sir Emil, or Chevalier Emil, in the photo area on your way to refreshments. The digital photos will be available next week at no charge. There's also a commemorative Sir Emil flight blanket in gunmetal gray waiting for you in the refreshment area to take home. Thank you to the Color Guard, their squadron commander, Captain Joseph J. Long, and Illinois Wing Commander, Colonel Andrew Lloyd. Please remain standing if you're able for the retirement of the colors.
Color. Halt. Prepare to retire the colors. Retrieve the colors.
This concludes today's Legion of Honor ceremony. Thank you, and we'll exit out these doors.
German artifact?